Action! Live in Las Vegas, Nevada. Let's talk deep from within our diaphragm.
Vegas, baby. Comes from within.
Welcome, everybody, to QuickBrainPower.com. We're going to continue on with our topics of interest. Me and Jeff are here, live in the conference room. Game changing the world.
Yeah, and this is essentially the QuickBrainPower Las Vegas corporate headquarters.
That is correct. All right, let's keep going. Next topic on the list: expression versus impression. So for me, that kind of means like when people interact with one another. A lot of the times, if you really understand what's happening, is a lot of people want to get stuff off their chest. They're just expressing. Versus like impressing. I want to put those because they're very semantically similar. Like they're both they're both pressions, right? Pressions, and one is an X and one is an im, right? Expression, impression. So the expression just basically means that's like saying when you're talking to someone, a lot of the uneducated people just dump their thoughts on the other person and then just wait for the response. That's their strategy, is dumping and listening. Versus you could like kind of like slow down and take a step back and think about how you want to structure your sentence, and you have the right to speak only in a way that it like penetrates an impression upon the other person. It's kind of like if you ever watched maybe like a Western or something, the guy's like waiting, and then he throws like a punchline. You know,
Clint Eastwood, for example.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I'm saying, that kind of thing. But it doesn't necessarily have to be like this dramatic moment. It could be used on a day-to-day basis where you're just so actively focused on listening that you're almost mute. That you're not trying to use the other person as like a
sounding board or an absorption.
Yeah, I would call it like a therapy sponge almost.
Right.
Like you're not trying to go through like your emotions, whatever, with the other person. Especially if it's like a strategic kind of relationship or something where you're trying to get something out of it. A lot of people, I could give you hundreds of examples, but bottom line is people love to just absolve themselves of their own guilt by throwing it on the other person. Versus like telling the other person what they actually want to listen to, right?
So what tactics should you employ? Should you just absorb it and not say anything, or should you redirect it away from just being there?
Again, as a quick brain power practitioner, you should have the distinction of what is proper training and something like good to interact with, and what's like a mental disorder, right? Because just like you have an impulse and reflex, think of like some things when someone makes you angry, it makes you want to kill them, right? So that's like the same thing. You don't go ahead and get a knife and kill them because you know better. But then on some low level things is you get this like gut reaction to say this, but that doesn't benefit you. So it's kind of like, on one hand, you should trust yourself and say the first thing on your mind. No. But then if your mind is like, have bad years of training, you need to retrain yourself to not be dumping your thoughts on the other person.
Right. Well, Bart, that brings three things come to mind with that. I think, we said earlier, less is more. When in every situation, speaking less or saying less than is necessary makes sense. Two, you seem to be sort of getting away from wearing your emotions on one's sleeve is far from ideal. You want to be able to manage your emotions rather than just blurt them out.
Why would you want to be always at the whim of the other person? You're basically just becoming you're just becoming like a victim of reality versus a leader of reality.
So don't fall into that trap.
Yeah, but the thing is, the funny thing about it is it's a trap you set yourself.
Right.
It's not like a lot of the things...
You spring it on yourself.
Yeah, a lot of things in psychology is that like what you think other people are doing to you is like, oh no, he did this to me, because that's the only way you're wiring yourself to respond. Oh, I had to punch him to teach him a lesson because he did this. Like there's no absolute. You don't have to do anything. You just have several mental disorders.
Correct. And again,
I don't mean that in a medicinal way. I mean that like you have like bad habits kind of way.
Yeah, not to beat a dead horse, 'cause that's all we hear about in this day and age is emotional intelligence. But there is all that is managing your emotions to
Yeah, I think like
relate better.
I think one of the things lawyers do is like if they wouldn't say it in court under oath, they wouldn't say it at all.
Mm-hmm.
Or like there's the old adage, think twice before you speak, or
Measure twice, cut once.
but basically you have to. It's all this is under the umbrella of quick brain power. And again, this is one more thing where you can't be dumping your thoughts, not just emotions, Jeff. Thoughts, just remember when I told you shouldn't be talking in dialogue with the other person.
Right.
It should be a progression of monologues.
Right.
It should be like his monologue and your monologue in a space-time continuum going forward. If you're actually in dialogue, it's okay, but you're like almost like vulnerable, surrendering yourself to the other person, and you're literally at their mercy. They could just like stab you and do anything at any time.
Figuratively via verbal communication.
Yeah, they could like that's where like it's kind of like some people have these things of like, oh, like, he or she's cheating on me without evidence and stuff, and then you tell them, hey, I think you're cheating on me. Like, you shouldn't be dumping those thoughts on the other person. Like, your thoughts are not supposed to be like a bazooka to hurt others, unless you want it. Like you know what I mean. If you want to hurt others, you can hurt others, but don't like try to like think through in dialogue with the other person. You know what I mean? You should resolve kind of like. Sometimes it's good to have a bouncing board,
right?
But like, you don't want to be like bounce. Like, let's say you're arrested for something. You don't want to be having a bouncing board while you're in the court at the court date. You want to have
Certainly
like
not.
Someone else to kind of like that's not related to it.
And then even like the concept that comes to me is economy. Be economical with your words. Be economical based on the situation. You don't want to blurt anything out in court. You want to say as little as possible.
Yeah, exactly.
That sort of mindset.
If you could kind of like parlay that almost like into a daily situation.
Yes.
The even stuff like some people like have small talk with like cash registers. It's like, oh yeah, my girlfriend just left me and all that. Like that sort of stuff is like. It's almost like you have no control of yourself, and it's like your subconscious. When you do stuff like that, like it's almost like your subconscious is running your conscious, and your conscious kind of went in the back seat for a sleep.
Or like a bartender. People go to the bar. The bartender's got to hear the life story of all these people. It's sort of like a quack psychiatrist.
Yeah, then you're just how many people were like arrested and all that because they confessed whatever.
Yeah, right.
Or like they did this and that, and the whole school found out whatever. It's like people can't close their yap,
Yeah, or there are all sorts of anecdotes in the 48 Laws of Power how there have been like leaders of countries. They thought they had lost the war because they didn't say anything. They should have lost, but they won just because they didn't say that they lost.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of interesting anecdotes.
Yeah, like the art of war kind of thing.
Yeah.
But
just shut your mouth.
I think a lot why people do this is to get like a dopamine rush, because to get if you're trying to like suck other people's emotions into you, looking for that dopamine rush, then you're much more likely to kind of break your state and just kind of get sucked into their reality, so to speak, because they have the stronger state. So you kind of like
you succumb.
With entropy and all that, you just kind of get absorbed into their world, and you kind of just keep expressing. Again,
but it's interesting, Bart. Just quickly,
before I say that, so again, just to finish off, I have this here written. So you should have only statements, only commands, like commanding other people do this, like this is a fact and this is what you have to do. Like no dialogue and no progression of dialogues. You shouldn't have like. You shouldn't be solving the problem mid-sentence with the other person. You like if you want, like you shouldn't have an argument of like a blame game. You should be there like, okay, this is how it's gonna end. In other words, it's jumping straight to the finish line. You don't want to be caught up in the middle. If this, the scenario, all you got to do is jump to the finish line and kind of like make your decision as if it's already finished. And you should never process the conversation in dialogue. That's what I'm talking about. Don't process the conversation in dialogue. Just say, Jeff, Jeff, do this. Jeff, don't do that. Jeff, this is how it is. Jeff, I like this. I don't like this. Like statements and commands is like the way to go. Like having a dialogue is okay.
What is the specific downfall of the dialogue relative to making the statements?
Because you're always vulnerable and at the mercy of the other person.
But maybe
just because you're vulnerable doesn't mean they won't take advantage of you, but doesn't mean they will. But you are at their mercy. You're always at the mercy of the other person.
What if it's calculated, Bart? I know, again, back to sales. Sometimes if you expose a weakness, you can draw the person in more. As a tactic, not to manipulate, but sometimes exposing a flaw draws them in more because it's sort of humanized.
As long as you're doing that for the purpose of empathy, maybe okay. But I mean just people,
strategically.
I just mean people who are like visibly dumping themselves.
Oh yeah, okay.
Who are just like, maybe like they have like a bad relationship with their parents and they just go on and on and on. Like you did this, or like you know what I mean. Like instead of being like, okay, I'm gonna go there and at 5 o'clock this happens. Like down to business is the way to go versus just dumping all of your thoughts and like, if you wouldn't do this, then this would happen. Just kind of things like you don't want to go there.
And so many are guilty. But super quick, back to that point I want to make. There's this new movement, I guess, in Northern California, dopamine deprivation or dopamine starvation, where people are actually resisting the impulse when they're bored to look at their phone, or resisting, dependency or addiction, and they don't even look someone in the eye. They completely avoid any dopamine production to try and just resist that, just grabbing for the phone and going. So again, it's an interesting concept.
But that's almost still like a weakness. Because it's almost like as if they have to not do it to control themselves, versus telling themselves, "Hey, I'm gonna look, once every 2 hours." Just like that. That's like the logical way to approach it.
Yes.
Versus like, "Oh, I'm such an idiot. I can't control myself. I have to resist."
Yeah, or any sort of boredom or anxiety, they turn immediately to their Facebook timeline for
it could
hour
be anything.
after hour.
See, like a phone could be like just like a synonym to like your favorite food, your favorite drug, your favorite medicine, whatever, anything people like
reaching for sugary snack.
Your getaway
yes.
thing, your getaway way. So, okay. The next topic. Run scenarios in your mind and only engage in possibilities you want to pursue. Again, that goes the same thing with you want to have a progression of monologues, and you don't want to have a series of dialogues, because you want to run scenarios in your mind. And if you're talking about something, if this would happen and you're talking about a fantasy, you're talking about a dream, that's not reality. In QuickBrainPower, reality is real. You want to be focused on your own behavior, and you want to be focused on the stuff you would be possibly engaging in, what you want to pursue. So if you're talking to someone, only entertain the possibilities you want to go forward in. Don't talk about... Like if I say, don't think of blue, don't think of blue, don't think of blue, don't think of blue, you don't want to be running negative scenarios in the other person's mind, because you can't not think of blue. That's not a logical sentence. Right. It's valid but not true, Right. It's like that's a kind of lawyer way to approach it. There's arguments that are valid, but they can be true, invalid and untrue. It could be invalid and true, and invalid and untrue. So there's it's you got to be careful, so only run the possibilities you want to engage. Next thing, what is brilliance? It's kind of really quickly. QuickBrainPower is the future of brilliance. What is brilliance? For me, brilliance is kind of like a clean room. Like there's no dust, no like uncluttered. There's no extraneous stuff.
Your mind being uncluttered. How great is that?
Just like staying in a room and painting can be brilliant. Just simple stuff. As long as it's not like lying to yourself, being delusional, deceptive, double talking yourself, avoiding the problem. Like all that stuff is not brilliant. Brilliance also is always often portrayed as like a light bulb. So it's just like the clarity without the clutter. Okay, what's urgent and important quadrants? That's something you specialize.
Yes.
You can talk about this, Jeff. You love this topic.
I didn't even realize we were coming in on that. So
what's urgent and important and urgent and not what's also not urgent and important?
yeah, well, I think it originated from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People 30 years ago, and essentially there are 4 quadrants, and I won't bore you with all of them, but the one that gets ignored that's actually the most important is something that is important but not urgent. A good example, say, going to the dentist, or writing the book, pursuing your dream, what you really want to do. And most people are caught up in the things that are urgent but not important. There are examples. So that if you can somehow, most people never even get into the quadrant that embodies something that's important but not urgent.
And you'll notice also with people who don't plan their meals properly, they just pull into the nearest drive-through, get even go to a convenience store, get some chips and a Slim Jim. That's just like one example.
Compared to a pre-packaged meal that you've done before. You're just grabbing it. Why not grab the thing that's the
and then they always say like the poorest people pay the most because they always pay at a restaurant, whatever, instead of like buying the raw ingredients and cooking it themselves and cheaper per pound, whatever. So
or even the most people don't plan to fail; they fail to plan type. So it's not difficult.
It's not like you're planning a bad plan. It's like the lack of a plan is almost guaranteed to fail you.
Yeah. So anyhow, there's urgent and important. There's important but not urgent. There's urgent and important.
I think a lot of people are afraid of the confrontation of a plan, because it's kind of like it's kind of like if you're in the warm water of the swimming pool, but then the exit is like if you have to go through the cold water to exit, but like you'd rather like be late for the one thing just to like not go through the pain of going through that cold water on your way to exit.
Yeah, and then that branches into once you get comfortable being uncomfortable, that's how you grow. Be brave, be dangerous, be progressively driven toward discomfort. And Bart, this is a nice segue. This morning when I took a shower, and I think I talked to you this like every day for the past 10 years, thanks to you, whenever I'm taking my shower, at the end, I put the water on as hot as I can, then I flip it and have the water be as cold as it can possibly be.
It's great.
And just go through just the
that's
nutshell
basically
of
how
why
cryotherapy works. Yeah. Cryotherapy is like a little bit more intense because I think it's like -100 Fahrenheit or something crazy like that. I don't know. But you only do that for like 2 to 3 minutes.
Yeah, and you have to do it the right way. Antonio Brown, the top receiver in the National Football League, actually frostbit his feet by rushing through it or not doing it properly.
Wow.
So it can be dangerous. You gotta know what you're doing.
Yeah, I didn't not rush. I think he stayed too long.
Yeah.
So the cold showers is just kind of like something that you have to do, but then you have like internal resistance to do it.
Yeah, that's what it reminded me of. You're sort of force yourself to do it. You're shocked, but then it's exhilarating, and
how
it
good
has
does
so
it
many
feel
benefits.
after?
Oh yeah. So, well, even like professional psychiatrists prescribe it for warding off depression. There are all sorts of.
Okay, let's go. Metaphors are hidden lies. They avoid the truth. You kind of disagree with this one, I know, but in my experience, it's not like a metaphor is wrong, but there's degrees of it, right? So like you could talk about metaphorically on a lot of things, but you can't. But for example, you can't. A metaphor doesn't hold in court. You know what I mean? Oh.
What about analogies? Are we talking an analogy different than a metaphor?
Yeah. No, I'm saying like the same thing.
So analogies don't hold up in court either.
They don't.
Why?
I mean, it helps people understand.
Okay.
But you're not actually connected to the pinpoint drop of reality. Like I said, reality is real. That's my mantra. Reality is real. You want to connect yourself to that pinpoint of like, let's give an example. You could like summarize things and paraphrase it, and you could. In other words, I guess another way of understanding it is like every sentence has a true way of feeling, right? And if you have like a sentence that only describes half of the situation because of the language, you're only going to get half the feeling because you're only using half the accuracy.
Okay, so what's the alternative? How do you make someone understand when your first course of action would be an analogy?
Like
what's the alternative? The better tactic?
The better tactic is either state the exact accurate truth, or move on to a different topic, right? You don't want to be. This is like. I'm gonna have to put this in a PDF because it's not something like to.
Or even Bart, you'll give like one of the things that when you communicate, for me, one of the things that's interesting with listening to you talk.
Yeah, aren't you like appreciative that when I speak, I try to like dissect it to the component unit of like the actual specific.
Yeah, or you give these arbitrary examples. You say this compared to driving a truckload of bok choy in Chicago compared to, you'll give like arbitrary examples to make your point.
Like for example, like remember when we talk about procrastination?
Right.
That's like a solid concept, right? You know what procrastination is, and you know exactly what it means to procrastinate procrastinations. And if I tell to you, Jeff, don't be a donkey, you know, maybe you could get a little bit towards there, like don't be stubborn or whatever, or like don't be a sloth, you know, don't be a lazy sloth. That's like the way I'm trying to teach you. It's like if I tell you, hey, don't be a sloth, that's like a metaphor, right? Don't be slow, whatever. But if I say, Jeff, I'm bothered by your procrastination, that hits the nail on the head. You know what I mean?
I'm definitely guilty of that, Bart, because I think I just, for whatever reason, I'm predisposed to try and communicate with analogies. And a lot of people, I'm sarcastic sometimes, I think because I'm from the Northeast, a lot of people completely misunderstand me and take my analogy as literal. And then they like get angry or offended. And it's I guess my fault because I'm not making myself understood as easily as I could be.
Yeah, you're doing part of the thing of like expression versus impression, right? You're saying what you want to say, not necessarily what they want to listen to.
Guilty as charged.
Right. Okay. Eclectic, ubiquitous, transcendence. This is like a really complicated topic. Like it goes very deep in the PDF.
And Bart, this is one that's like a fancy combination of words, but those are the only three words that can.
That's the only way to put it together, right?
Communicate it.
It's like there's only a certain type of like material and fuel combination that can get you to space or whatever, right? You can't just put in some like Gatorade and fly into space.
Now that's an analogy, Bart, and it helped me. It very clearly illustrates the point.
Here's the point, though. Metaphors help you understand, but when you don't use metaphors, you can change. You can't change speaking in metaphors.
Okay.
If you're trying to change impact with change, like in other words, yeah, that's the only way that I could say it is that.
But that metaphor, Bart, you can't use Gatorade as a fuel to get to space. It completely defines makes your point.
Metaphors will highlight the concept.
Okay.
But when you speak the truth, you can change the truth.
All right.
Right? I don't mean like lie. I mean like you can actually move on.
Okay, so that's the distinction.
Because you can't. Here's like the underlying truth. You can't expand upon the metaphor and say, hey, well, what if the propellers? And then you're just going on and on into the metaphor so much that the metaphor becomes a replacement for reality.
Now, how did that nuance come to you? That's just something that you identified as an important distinction?
That comes from me trying to be a great practitioner and trying to influence people. If I say, it's almost as if it's not only does it require more effort to say the truth, it requires more courage.
Okay, of course.
So a lot of critical thinking, even like that's something that I think the Mensa guys would get really good. Is like something similar.
Right.
Is not the same thing as something exact.
Right.
Or like that's all I have to say on that. Eclectic, ubiquitous, transcendence. That's for me. That means is like you have to kind of be an instant omniscient at all times.
We'll take it through. Eclectic, then take a ubiquitous, transcendent. Eclectic here and there.
Many things.
Desultory.
Yeah.
Eclectic, many different.
Ubiquitous, I think, means being everywhere.
Everywhere at once, omnipresent.
Yeah, ubiquitous means everywhere, and then transcendent. So after you're everywhere, you transcend being everywhere, and then you're almost not yourself. You're almost as if like an actor playing yourself almost.
Yes. And that harkens back to watching yourself from above, sublimating your ego, and sort of being outside
It's so much easier
yourself,
to
gaining
control
insight
yourself
on
when you're not yourself.
Yes.
Because if you try to control yourself in first person, it's very much like the game is rigged against you because it's all about willpower. Versus if you think of yourself as a third person, then you're just like ordering yourself as if you are your own robot.
Yes.
Like do this, like, you know.
So again, it's so much easier to control yourself when you're not yourself.
Yes. All right, and then now we're gonna cut now for a little break.